All right. Hey, team. Welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is Mark, and I have got a great guest on here today. I'm super excited for you guys to get to know Galynn Beer. Galen, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark. It's exciting to be on here with you and talk a little bit about leadership.
Awesome. Let's talk leadership. What does it mean for you, Galen, to be intentional?
For me, being intentional always starts with having a good vision for where you're going. I don't know how I would be intentional without kind of know what my overall arching objective is. So I think you have to know where you're going, and then that kind of dictates, what you're going to accomplish on a daily basis in order to achieve that. And for me, it's really a way out there type thing. Like I have a vision for how I would want business to be conducted or where we'd like our business to go. It's way out there. And even though that might be way off in the future, you're still doing those daily things that will step you toward that. So that intentional part is making sure you get up every day and think about what do I have to do to achieve that vision.
How important are those little things on a day-to-day basis as it pertains to the big picture? Obviously, if we don't take action on a day-to-day basis, if we don't execute against the vision, the intention, where we're going, obviously nothing happens. I get that. I just feel like there's a greater level of depth for you within those little day-to-day things.
I think the day-to-day things are important. I don't know if everything you do really moves you closer to that vision, but the piece that's important is if you're going to achieve that, there has to be some level of discipline. And so that's where achieving those little things every day comes in, is because you want to have that discipline to take each step that it's going to take you to get towards that vision, whatever that is, whether it's helping someone on your team get closer to that. But you can't wake up and ignore it completely, in my opinion.
The word discipline, the word nobody likes to hear because we were all shamed with it as children, right? And today it seems like a
Absolutely.
bad word, even
Yeah.
though as I live in this world of personal and professional development, and I interview people such as yourself that have had a good deal of success and good long careers, what I'm finding is it all boils down to, do I have the discipline to do the things that I don't feel like doing in order to live my intentional life?
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, to your point, I remember discipline being that bad word when you were at church and you did something wrong or
Yeah.
something, but it is different. And I think discipline to me is about really having that internal motivation to get up and to kind of stick to a plan.
Mm-hmm. We have to reframe that as the thing that we get to do, as opposed to the thing that we have to do.
Absolutely, you're right. It is the thing that you get to do every day, and even if you think of discipline in sort of a negative connotation, your point is not. I mean, there is a lot of security and a lot of reward that comes from that discipline. So, yeah, some of the things you do might have a little pain associated with them, but the ultimate reward outweighs that.
Mm-hmm. I was just talking with somebody about this the other day. It may have been on the podcast. We were talking about the discipline to experience delayed gratification,
Yeah.
especially in today's world where everything is there. I mean, it's the friction has been removed from the buying process for most of the things that we get. We can order from Costco, we can order from Amazon, have it delivered. I live 15 miles from any town, but I can have stuff here in less than 3 hours. All my groceries can be here in time for supper as we record this podcast, right? So we live in that world, and people have a really tough time with experiencing delayed gratification.
It is. I think it's hard to lead if you don't have that ability to accept delayed gratification. I think if you're going to live day to day, that you're not going to set the right tone for any team.
Mm-hmm. That's a really important point. I would love people to just hit reverse 15 seconds two times on your Spotify app really quick and go back and listen to that again. From an intentional leadership standpoint, I have to be comfortable in the discomfort of the waiting.
Yeah, and the waiting is hard. I mean, you see it out there on the horizon, but when it all comes together and you've done what you wanted to get done, it does make it worth it. But I think, our society has grown a little bit impatient towards that, and I think that's why not everyone will be a leader. It depends on kind of what your motivations are.
That's true. And I think a little bit impatient is a very nice way of putting it. All
Yeah,
right, let's
it
talk.
could be more than that, but yes, I'm understating it a bit.
Yeah. Well, we've all grown impatient in a world where everything is so easy to get to. We just want to get there faster. Nothing can happen fast enough for us, and that's true for a lot of people coming into companies too. Let's talk a little bit about talent retention and things like that, because a lot of companies in agribusiness really struggle to attract and retain good talent. So let's talk. How do we apply intentional leadership to retention and attraction of good people?
Well, that is difficult. I mean, if it were easy, everyone would just be hiring and you would never see anyone leave your organization. So no one's going to get it perfect. But I think the things you have to look for, and you hope you can vet out in an interview process, are people with sort of a shared vision that view what you do as more than a job. Because I think if someone is just coming to work for you because they liked the pay scale that was listed on the job application, that they might not be in it for the long haul. That's to our point earlier, that's a short-term gratification. So we really like, for us, we like to hire people that are almost looking at what we do as a career. We're in there to provide value to our customers, and they want to do that over the long haul, to the point that it's not, did I get a $20,000 raise this year? It's, did I get a raise and do I get to keep doing what I love? Is kind of how I look at that. It's hard, but I think that's what you kind of have to look for to maintain and keep your talent.
So again, we're moving towards that long-term vision, that long-term intention, which I think is really important. What have you found over the course of your career that's important about long-term vision within the culture?
Yeah, within the culture, there's it's interesting that you mentioned culture, because I was just reading a book here a while back, and there was a statement in there that really caught my attention, and it was, culture has to be caught. It can't be taught. And I'd never really thought about that. I think everyone wants to teach people what their culture is. But I think what that said to me was, long-term vision might set the tone for your culture, because at the end of the day, if employees have to catch your culture, that means you as a leader have to be modeling that every day. And when they see you doing the things that it takes to achieve the vision of the company, whatever that is, it becomes sort of infectious. And next thing you know, you've created a culture just through your behaviors. Now, I know there are companies that have various, insert company name and university, where they do teach their culture. But to me, it doesn't stick if it's not modeled or demonstrated through leadership.
I really like how you're framing this up. You may be the first one in 20 some episodes of this that I've recorded so far that actually framed it up this way. So thank you. And I'm trying to justify what I just said. As you said, culture can't be caught. Culture has to be caught. It can't be taught.
Yep.
Right. And this is what we see. And this is what I see a lot of leaders doing, is they're trying to teach, right? So here's the mission statement. Here's the vision statement. Here's what we do. Here's what we don't do. And then it's all intellectual. It's all
Yes.
logical. It all makes sense. Do I see my leader? Do I see my CEO and my vice president and my team leader living that out in a day-to-day function? That's intention if I see them doing it. In
Absolutely.
excuse me, I would say that's intentional if I see them doing
Yep.
it. Well intended if I see them say it, but
Yeah.
maybe not well executed upon.
It's definitely do as I do world when it comes to leadership. And, words on a paper just become words on a paper. In fact, I think it undermines your culture and your vision if you write down what you think your culture is, but you don't live that culture. I think it actually becomes counterproductive at that point.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. And I think hopefully that's fascinating to anybody that's watching or listening to this right now. So the flip side of that I want to just touch on real quick, Galen, is what if you as the leader are doing some things that you don't want to see your people doing? And what if some of the stuff is, and I've heard this so many times over the years, about people maybe not willing to work as long as I am. They're not willing to grind as hard as I grind. And I don't know that I should, right? Should anybody have to grind as hard as you're grinding if you're the top guy or gal in the company? But that becomes the sort of unwritten expectation. And so when I see people operating like that, then and I have emails flying into my inbox at all hours of the night, then it feels like, well, if I'm not doing that, then I'm not living up to the culture.
Right. I think again the expectation you set is a big part of that. For me, it's about productivity. So, I mean, if in my job, if my responsibilities require me to work 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, whatever it is, if I'm burning the midnight oil, I hope that anyone that works for me doesn't think that's required of them. We all have different responsibilities and different expectations. I always view people on their productivity, and some people are very productive. I mean, some people can get done in 6 hours what it takes another person to get done in 12 hours. And if they have acquired the intellectual capital and have the focus to be hyper productive, they shouldn't plan to work like that. Should their investment in acquiring that intellectual capital should be rewarded in that they may not have to work as many hours to get the same thing done.
100% agree. Look at that. There's so many ways that if you're really being intentional, that you can just understand as we look at different people and different capacities based on their intellectual property, intellectual experience, capital, whatever you want to call it. They may have a different experience than maybe somebody who's newer or more fresh in the company.
If I've got to create something in Excel, I'm going to burn the midnight oil. It's not that I can't do it. I don't do it enough that it takes me a long time. Someone else may do that every day, and they can do it in a few hours, and that's fantastic. Again, it's you're not paying for someone for the hours they put into the job. You're paying them for what they produce and how they move you closer to your vision.
Yeah, it's a great catch. So it's super interesting, and one of the reasons that I want to do this podcast that we've been producing all these episodes for this podcast is to help people tune into maybe their own personal swing around what it looks like for them to be really intentional. This is not a cookie cutter program where we say, hey, an intentional leader does this, 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 and this, and that's all you can do. There's no way you can possibly dissect that. There's too many permutations of the neurological pathways of your personal brain. What we are saying is just be conscious of the people around you and
Yep.
how your actions, like what they see you do, may be affecting you. And I'm just going to position this idea, Galen, with people. Listen, if you're constantly frustrated with turnover and you're still there and you're in the leadership role, you probably need to take a good hard look in the mirror intentionally and see, okay, how am I possibly contributing to this?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's a point if you're having turnover where you could be frustrated by it. You could maybe say I'm not vetting people properly through the hiring process or what. You can rationalize that in a lot of ways. We all want to avoid stepping in front of the mirror, and I've had to do it throughout my career. And if you don't step in front of the mirror, then you never become a more effective leader. There's always some other reason someone left. It wasn't in alignment with the culture, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you got to take a good hard look at yourself, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, what's been one of those big hurdles that you've had to overcome in your career, Galen?
Man, I will tell you, and I'm never going to overcome it completely. It's patience. And I know that I'm just a person that when I see where I want to go, I just want to be there. and and so the process can wear on me a bit. But I think where I've had to develop the most patience, and I have to constantly work at it, is to make sure that I'm kind of seeing that other person's perspective. Sometimes someone's bringing a problem to me, and I can just almost feel the frustration. And then I kind of have to almost have that internal conversation with myself. Why am I frustrated? And I have to stop and think about, okay, that they're looking at it from this way. And a classic example, in my opinion, is you get companies. Every employee is rewarded in different ways, but if you have a company where you reward a sales guy for volume, but your goal is profitability, he doesn't care about that. And maybe someone brings you a problem that because there's a hurdle for him to reach some bonus, but at that hurdle, in order for you to remove it, impacts profitability. You're going to clash, and you have to figure out how to work through that. And just really, rather than being irritated, just taking a deep breath and having that patience to really talk it through and find a solution.
Yeah. I think so many people get caught up in a story when that happens, a story about that other person. And I start to look at everything I see about how this guy or gal shows up that is not in alignment or not aligned with how I would like to
Yeah.
see them, because it doesn't line up with my story, right?
Yeah.
And the more I look at it, the more I see of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more I see it, the more I look at it.
Eh, yes, both ways, but it is hard sometimes to for me to take the time and the patience to kind of get that overall picture. I and sometimes we just we're busy and we don't want to invest the time, and we sort of just give an instruction that really isn't helpful in the long term. And again, just things that you read or hear that stick with you. And one thing that I always try to remember is if you've told someone something 3 times and they don't get it, someone is stupid and it's not them. And that always sticks with me. If I tell someone something and they repeat that behavior, I try to stop before it gets to 3 and go, I'm not taking the time or investing the time to communicate so that we can move past this.
There's a well-intended pause that comes when we start to feel that feeling of frustration
Mhm.
between direction given and inappropriate response or lack of response or the wrong response or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, your point earlier, most of the time the fingers are pointing back at you. It's not, when there's an issue, it's just go look in the mirror and see what's going on.
I had a train the trainer here about 20 years ago that I went to when I was first learning good high quality Socratic facilitation, which is what we use in our business today. The teacher's name was Mark, also Mark Reardon, and the thing that he taught me or taught us at that time is when we're asking a question of the audience or giving a direction, if they're not giving you the answer or taking the action that you want them to see,
Yeah,
then you probably asked the wrong question or you asked it
absolutely.
incorrectly. So we have
Yep.
to assume that always falls back on us.
Yep, exactly. And that's hard. Again, yeah, you have to be willing to really have a good self-awareness and not be afraid to take a critical look at yourself at times.
One of the reasons that we're producing so many episodes is to give people a chance to think about this a lot. My hope is that people are getting enough out of it that they want to listen to the next one and the next one.
Yeah.
What we know is over time, if we just hear this conversation enough, that it starts to become more embodied and more ingrained. And they say this just on the backside of our current conversation around saying it well enough or instructing it well enough.
Yeah.
This intentional leadership culture, I believe, to bring it back to something you said a little bit ago, is something that has to be caught. I don't know how well it can be
Yeah.
taught. I think we can frame this up. We can put it in a training program. We can put it in a book and do a lot of things and put it in front of people. But to become truly intentional is incredibly hard. To really be intentional, it takes a lot of time, a lot of focus, and it's really challenging for people to adopt as a behavior.
It is. And you know, to our point earlier about that long-term vision, I mean, it's so much faster to tell someone or teach them, you know, have them watch an instructional video. Oh, they've learned it. I expect them to live it. It takes a lot of patience, which I've already admitted is a shortcoming, but it takes a lot of patience and a lot of long-term vision to model it. That someone's not going to wake up and see you do something over the course of a day and, oh, okay, I get it. They got to see you do that over the long haul. I'm not sure. I think something happened to my sound there, Mark.
We're okay. We'll cut that part out. We'll go
Okay.
back. So one of the reasons I spent a little bit more time with you on that particular question today and just kind of picking that apart is because like that patience is that's not a Galen issue. That's a Mark issue. And every other leader that I've ever worked with, right, is how
Yeah.
do we be patient enough to see the result through, right?
I
So
know. I hope people don't hear me self-talking to myself all the time to try and remind myself to do just that.
I think it's a great it's great evidence of your self-awareness. And I would love to see some more people develop a little more self-awareness around patients because they might just be
Yeah.
lost, in a season of life where it just feels like we're never going to get there and I'm starting to grow impatient because that's what happens. It's the discomfort between the moment you set out on the journey and the moment that you finally get there, and we don't know how long that's going to be.
Absolutely.
So let's just talk. What's been a big win for you over the course of your career, Galen?
I think a big win for me, I think what is the most satisfying for me are people that I've worked with or supervised over time that I can tell have bought into where we need to go and how we need to conduct our business. I can go to a meeting where someone I've worked with is presenting and I can just sit there and go, that's exactly right. I mean, it's that ability not to replicate yourself, but to be able to replicate that desire to achieve the same thing.
I like that. That is a great answer. Very good. All right. So, what book should people be reading, Galen? What's coming up for you that you're reading or listening to right now?
I have a book that I just refer to frequently, and I don't know if everyone takes the same thing from it that I did. I do feel like it should be required reading for leaders. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And it basically lays out a lot of what we've discussed here. And it really it comes down to what is your motivation in life? Is it short term? Is it the acquisition of things? Is it the acquisition of power? Or is there some greater meaning that you're working toward? And then the other one that I think is a pretty good complement to that has stuck with me as Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, because it really, once you read that, you understand you don't wake up and be good at something. You're going to have to invest the time and the effort to do that.
That both are perfect recommendations. I've read them both. And interestingly enough, I just pulled Man's Search for Meaning back off the shelf last night to go back through again. It sits on a bookshelf near our pool table, and I was looking at it. I said, I think I need to go back through that. So I literally just pulled it off last night.
I do the same thing. I have it in paperback, but I travel quite a bit. So now I have, on iBooks, and I carry an iPad. And almost every time I complete a book, before I download another book, I kind of just scroll through that library and go, okay, what do I want to review? And that one always pops up. And of course, I've got my highlights in there. But you go and you read a highlight, you almost read 10 pages on either side of that highlight, you know.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. Good. Well, what do you do to keep your energy up? How do you what do you do to stay strong and stay focused and keep producing all day?
Well, I think it gets back to a little bit of what we've talked about already is those things that are long term. So to a fault probably, but I like to start my day by going to the gym. I find that to be a good stress release. And I see people go to the gym and put their earbuds in and, listen to music the whole time. I'm almost oblivious to others. And when I'm there, I don't listen to music. It's where I process everything I need to do for that day. I kind of vet it in my mind and know what intentional steps I need to get done that day towards the larger picture. And so the time really flies for me, when I'm there. But I feel that's almost the way that I have to start my day.
You bet. What's your favorite workout?
I am not married to a single one. Generally speaking, I have days where I just do cardio. There's other days where I do cardio weights. And then there's other days that you just try to do some strength training that, to prevent to prevent you from having issues as you grow older.
Hmm. I was just listening over the weekend while on a little road trip with my 80-year-old mother, and it was all about how important the musculoskeletal,
Hmm.
which we never measure. We measure body fat, we measure heart rate, we measure weight, but we don't measure the musculoskeletal, the muscle mass, like how much muscle do you have on your body, and how important that is for
Yeah,
vitality as we go into our later years, which is important if you're anywhere post 40. So
and I am
yeah.
on
And
the
if you're
pa-
not, you get to
on
start so that you don't have to work so hard when you get to be 50.
yeah, exactly. And the whole patience part kind of weighs into my workouts too, because my favorite are just the high intensity intervals, and that perfect for someone that probably doesn't have the patience to go run a marathon, but it works.
There you go. There should be a marathon just for hit workouts. I like it.
That's right.
You bet. Well, what's something that for you, Galen? A couple questions to bring in here for a living or a landing. What do you want to improve on this year?
Man, what I have to improve on is I think the thing I'm always trying to improve on is that having a better self-awareness. I know you always can go get
Mhm.
360 feedback from colleagues and things like that. I'm not 100% sure 360 feedback, like someone's going to hold back on you. I think it's important for you to be able to recognize your own shortcomings and your own flaws and then to work on them. And so I'm constantly trying. I will never win this battle, but I'm always constantly uh looking to see what are the areas that I'm weak. And I'm weak in organization. And I will tell you at my age, I'm not going to completely ever overcome that. But you still have to figure out ways to work around it. I'm more, hey, here's my big idea. I'd love to have people that like the detail go to go accomplish it. But I've also realized that I've got to be better about some of those things. So it's just a self-awareness. Where are the areas that I need to improve to continue really a journey to always be an effective leader?
I really appreciate that you brought up self-awareness. What a great thing to want to improve on. Organization, man, we all need to improve on organization. We get
Yeah.
it, but to be aware enough that this is a thing, and if I don't stay on top of this thing, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
scary. You don't like to wake up and face it every day, but if you want to get better, then you should.
so one of the things that we teach about in this curriculum now is around intentional protocols. And I know like there are certain protocols that when I put these things in place, it allows me to stay organized, to stay on top of tasks, to
Yeah.
stay and when I'm not disciplined enough, to bring back the
Yeah.
first part of our conversation, to work those protocols on a day-to-day basis, then I end up with a huge mess. And I've
Yeah.
done that. I've painted myself into a corner more times than I can probably even count, certainly more than I would care to admit. And I hate it. And I never want to do it again. I probably will, but that's where the protocols, what are the things that just kind of
Yeah.
keep you disciplined and keep you moving forward? with that organization in this case, or whatever the behavior is really, these things are really important.
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, you're always going to get stuff's still going to get thrown on your plate. It's how do you keep stuff from falling off the edges of that plate?
Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate enough to have an assistant, and we have a small team here at Thrive, and I don't put things on my calendar. If you and I were having a text message conversation or an email conversation, as silly as it sounds, I'm fortunate enough to have an assistant. I know, and I know not
Yeah,
everybody has one of those. And depending on your situation, they're actually quite affordable. And you can find someone outsourced. I've never met
yeah.
we've been working for me for 4 years. We've never met in person.
Oh, wow.
I know her well. I know her kids. So,
Yeah.
through the Zoom interactions and things like this. My wife was able to go meet her last year when she was in her part of the country, but we've never met in person.
Oh, it's
And she's
interesting.
also
Yeah.
never been full time. She's very efficient at what she does. She works across myself, my wife, and a couple of other coaches in the space that we also know. And so everybody kind of helps to share the cost. So consider it a fractional assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like fractional ownership of how they do
Yeah.
fractional ownership of jets and things like that. If you can, and when you find people that are good, I mean, they just stay busy because people
Mhm.
recognize that value and they just want to keep tapping into it more and more.
So then the point of my story is it's very affordable, actually, for
Mhm.
more affordable than you would imagine to be able to find.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of these people out there that want to do this gig work and things like that.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of training, and we have to create protocols and systems uh, because you may not understand the full capacity of the business. But this is as simple as it gets. If it's a text message conversation or an email conversation, once I get to the point where we agree on a time to meet, I screenshot it and I text it to her. Now I know it would, Galen, what does it take me? Maybe 90 seconds to go in and create a calendar invite,
Right.
send over and put in the Zoom info or the Teams meeting info or whatever. Just if you use Outlook, it just automatically puts Teams in for you. But that's 90 seconds that I give myself to
Yeah.
go focus on something else and let her manage that piece of the organization.
Absolutely. You do what you're good and efficient at and let someone else do what they're good. That's maximum productivity right there.
Absolutely. All right, last question. Talk to me about vulnerability. How important is this vulnerability to be able to create intentional workplaces in your experience?
I think you'll never get true buy-in of people that work for you if you try to always be this stoic, I'm never wavered type leader. That's just not reality. And I think employees respond if they see that you are vulnerable in areas. I try to admit shortcomings here and there. The other thing I think it does, it lets them know it's a level of transparency. And I think that anyone that is looking to you for leadership wants to know they can trust what you're saying and what you're doing. And so transparency is a part of that. And I think vulnerability is a part of that transparency.
I think that's incredibly well said. Incredibly well said. That's an important piece. So, Galen, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your time today.
You bet. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Mark.
Likewise, I've enjoyed it. I've learned, and I hope that you guys have learned from this as well. So, thanks for being on the pod. All right, you guys, make sure that you are checking out the work on the backside. You can hear my debrief from this episode in our follow-up episode, which will pop up right behind this. Take care. We'll see you next time.